Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and co-host of the Fear and Greed Business Podcast. And as always, I'm with Canna Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, which is the financial literacy platform that is pretty much everywhere where you can consume content. Books, podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, pretty much everywhere. Canna, how's your week been?
Michael, my week has been great. We're in manifesting March, so I'm loving the flow of money.
Do you get tired of manifesting at all? Do you wake up and go, oh, do I have to manifest today?
I won't lie. This morning I did think to myself, I am a little bit run down and exhausted, but I get a new injection and I'm rearing and ready to go.
What are you injecting?
Well,
positivity.
I'm someone who gets very easily inspired and motivated, and I just get this rush.
So it's an injection of life.
Yes.
It's nothing illicit.
No, nothing illegal. But I want to hear about your book sales because your book only launched on the 1st of March. I have it sitting on my bedside table, ready to start reading as soon as I get through Gabby Bernstein. And I want to hear, because you said your goal being me being the diehard, you being the dabbler in this. Mm-hmm. Where have you dabbled in some successful book sales?
I have been manifesting. I've been manifesting hard. And lately I've just been saying things, and the moment it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, wish I could take that one back, but I can't. It's out there now.
That's the story of my life, to be honest.
And so, no, I've been manifesting book sales, and I've been manifesting good reviews and things, and it has actually been working, which is
yep. Told you so.
You did tell me so, and I actually made a conscious effort to just like focus on all of the positive things and the good things that people have been saying, and the fact that suddenly kind of the books are actually being bought and being consumed, and I'm hearing this feedback from people who have read it.
In the flow. Indeed.
The book is called How to Be Remembered. I may as well give a little plug there, and you will find it basically wherever you buy books, How to Be Remembered. And if you do read it and you like it, then shoot me a message on Instagram, Michael Thompson Author or something. Obviously, if you hate it, keep that one to yourself. Don't want to manifest that kind of energy in myself. But yes, in summary, I think manifesting has a 60 to 70% success rate.
Okay. All right. I'm going to show my gratitude and respect towards your 67%, and I'm happy with that. Thank you, Michael.
Well, considering I started at like 10% because I was a big skeptic, and now I'm like, you know what? Focus on the positive, visualize where you want to get to, and it just does seem to work.
I feel like you're withholding a little bit of exciting information about this book.
Well, okay, there is obviously there is more to it, and I've been focusing on manifesting that growth. And so now, the rights have kind of sold in the US. It's coming out there, and it's going to come out in Germany and in Italy and in the Czech Republic of all places. And the film rights have sold, which is just very exciting. The fact that a Hollywood studio has picked up the film rights, and so that there is a chance that one day we could be seeing How to Be Remembered on the big screen.
I have goosebumps. Look.
I manifested those. Yes. And
it is so, honestly, now I'm tapping my pen against the desk. I'm so excited. That is incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely amazing. And like, obviously you've worked incredibly hard, and I'm sure there've been lots of challenges along the way, but it's flourishing in front of you. This is incredible.
You know what? I am going to upgrade my 60 to 70% success rate for manifesting. It's nudging 90. It is a 90% success rate. I nearly said I'm converted. I'm like, I might hold that one back for a little bit. We have a very serious topic. I mean, all of our topics are pretty serious, even though I kind of have the ability to trivialize pretty much everything, it seems. But today's a really important one because we talk a lot about things like the power of compound interest and set and forget investing and the importance of paying attention to your super, like these things that really kind of require a bit of attention, and they need time as well. And it makes me wonder, what are these all things? Is everything that you need to do in terms of building kind of a financial security, is it something that you need to get into early in order to make a difference? Even just kind of sorting out your finances, is it ever too late to sort those out?
Absolutely not. It is never too late.
And that is our shortest episode yet. 5.5 minutes. Question asked, question answered. No, there's a lot that I want to unpack throughout this and maybe even kind of have a look at different ages, what we can be doing in those demographics. Basically to go, all right, we want to fine tune our finances, or we want to supercharge our super, or we want to kind of finally get started in investing. And is it ever too late, and what you should be looking at different ages? Before we do that, though, we do need to make it crystal clear that anything that we're talking about today is general in nature. It's never personal, investment, strategic, or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only.
That is correct, in particular for this podcast, because we're really going to delve into what you should be considering about and making sure is a priority if you're worried that it is too late. So please, if you hear something you think, oh, this could be relevant for me, that is when you pick up the phone and make an appointment to go and see a financial planner and talk to your accountant and get good quality professional advice based on your individual, unique financial situation.
Yeah, it is really important. And this is just basically to kind of start some ideas flowing. Really,
yes, so you turn up going, look, I heard this podcast on how do you afford that, and Michael and Canna were talking about this salary sacrificing or talking about investing in shares, and you actually turn up there going, we need to talk about this. I think I should be doing it, and they can give you some advice, and you're off and on your way quickly.
Salary sacrificing, investing in shares. I'm already making notes, and you haven't even technically started yet. Broadly speaking, is it ever too late to start paying attention to your money? And I'm not necessarily talking about investing here, but there's no cutoff really, is there?
No. It is never, ever too late to start paying attention to your finances. And in fact, when you combine some newfound financial knowledge with the right action, you can actually try and catch up on lost time and lost opportunities. It's unbelievable the damage you can quickly fix.
Really?
Yes.
See, that to me is actually really exciting. The fact that it's not just kind of get something organized and you kind of deal with the benefits of that from that point on, that you might be able to undo some of the damage that you've done through neglect of your finances. We're talking about everything here, aren't we? This is kind of budgeting and investing and tracking your spending, etc. We're not ruling anything out.
No, nothing. It considers absolutely everyone in all situations, good and bad. And I say this all the time on my content, in my podcast, in my YouTube videos. When you put your head, heart, and mind to it, it's incredible what you can achieve. So much so, I'm actually going to be a bit cheeky, if you don't mind, and mention a podcast where I interview a lady named Sharon, who I interviewed about 18 months ago, and she had only just started to pick up the ball with her retirement planning.
And this is on Sugar Mama's Fireplay.
Correct. Yep. Her name's Sharon. So if you search Sharon, you'll find the two podcasts, because I interview her and then I interview her 18 months later. And in the space of 18 months, she manages to build up an investment portfolio and get her superannuation sorted and retires. And she talks about this. She talks about how she thought she'd left it too late. There was nothing she could do. She was looking at a very delayed retirement. But in fact, when she started doing things and getting educated and speaking to her accountant, she actually is semi-retired now.
Okay, when you were talking just then, I don't know whether you noticed, I realized I might be going a little bit mad here, because I actually actively started to put on what I consider my skeptic's hat. And I physically started to put I don't have a hat. I'm just miming putting it on. And because I would have thought that superannuation, we're saying we're not excluding anything, that it's never too late for anything, but I would have thought that superannuation is the exception to the rule, because that if you start paying attention to it just a couple of years before your retirement, that it's too late to make a meaningful difference to the accumulation phase of your superannuation savings.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And this is why you need to see a financial planner and or an accountant, because there are so many different strategies and tools and things that you can do to help your superannuation accumulate and grow again.
You've obviously worked with a lot of clients over the years. you've been contacted by a lot of people, you've spoken to a lot of people like Sharon. Have you ever seen people just give up on their finances and you've either needed to come in and go, hang on, no, you can still do this, or just they have just gone, it's too late, I don't know what I'm doing and I can't salvage this?
When someone comes to see me, they're coming to me with hope. And for me to say, look at these ideas and consider this and that. So to answer your question, no, people turn up looking for a solution. I think the people who have completely given up don't bother making that appointment to see me or a financial planner. Okay. They've kind of just thrown the towel in and not even trying.
Okay.
But the people who do come and see me, they are looking for an idea, they're looking for a strategy, and they're looking for a solution. And it's incredible when you step back and look at your entire situation. You don't just focus, for example, on your super. You look at other things that are going on around you. And, there are so many concessions. There's the co-contribution, there's salary sacrificing, there's spouse contributions. There's even a CGT exemption, which is something that's incredibly powerful for small business owners that are looking to sell their business before they retire.
So that's a capital gains tax exemption. Exactly. That if they were to sell their business before they retire, in certain circumstances, with good professional advice.
Read the fine print. There's certain conditions and criteria that you must meet. But that could potentially save someone hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax. There's also the quality of the assets in the superannuation portfolio. And remember, superannuation is not savings, it's typically investments. So people might want to look at the products that they're using, the investments that they're using, how tax effective they are, how cost effective they are. All these things really do help catch up lost time and lost opportunities. And by no means am I saying don't worry about it, leave it all, we'll make it up closer to the time. That's just silly. And, you could have actually ended up achieving so much more and having a lot less stress in your life. But never, ever throw the towel in because you think it's too late. There are lots of people who can help you. There are lots of strategies, legal strategies that can help you. And there is a wide range of strategies. But when you use a combination of things, you can really set yourself up for a lot more freedom, comfort, and independence than you might alternatively think.
Okay, let's get into some ages because we have a lot of people listening to us across a wide range of ages. And so I want to kind of go into some detail on this. And when we hit my demographic, I may well use myself as an example. It seems to be what I do most of the time. In their 20s, I'm going to make some assumptions here because I think we'd probably need to do a few kind of assumptions in this. Otherwise, we'll end up too vague. We've got people kind of just starting out in work. They might have had kind of part-time jobs, et cetera, in their teens. Let's kind of go to their 20s, starting out in kind of full-time work. Probably a higher disposable income in that there's not a huge number of other commitments necessarily, particularly in the earlier part of the 20s. What's the priority here? Is it starting a budget? I know, just watch your eyes light up when I say the B word.
Yes, look, the foundation of wealth management is budgeting. You don't know how to manage your money. How are you going to afford to buy things and invest in things and create that long-term financial security and independence for yourself? So learning how to manage your cash flow, your accounts, and your budget is extremely important. And if you can get onto this earlier in life, it's going to serve you for the rest of your life. You will set yourself up for easier and more efficient success, I believe.
And that's not to say that you can't then still have that kind of disposable income and spend it on what you want. It's just being aware of where your money is actually going.
Understanding and having that transparency and that ownership of where you like to spend money. And I am not someone who will tell people you should not spend money. That's not my mantra at all. I'm all about buy what you love, value, use, and appreciate, but have it within the boundaries of a budget. And I don't look at it as budget as you can only spend X, Y, Z. It gives you spending boundaries. So you can spend X amount per month on clothes or entertainment after you've prioritized your rent, your food, your utilities, and obviously all your financial responsibilities. So budgeting definitely earlier in life, the easier and the better, and you'll set yourself up correctly. The next thing is obviously looking at your superannuation. And I know this is going to sound a little bit confusing because for someone in their early 20s, they're like, well, Kat, I can't access my super until I'm probably going to be, under legislation probably changing or evolving over time, 65, 70, 75, depending on what happens. Why would I bother about my superannuation? But in fact, it's really important and of great value to you to set your superannuation up correctly, because you've got 10.5% per annum of your employer contributing to this account. You've got the benefit of time, and you want to obviously make sure that your money is working for you in that superannuation account so that when you do go to retire, you have a fabulous retirement.
Is it more about kind of making sure that you're aware of where that money within super is going, and less probably about funneling more into super at that time? It's because you're obviously going to be having 10% going in there anyway. So it's more about kind of making sure that you're happy and informed about kind of where that is going.
It's understanding that it's invested in line with your risk profile. And we have a podcast purely on risk profiling and how to understand what your risk profile is. So make sure you've set your superannuation account up correctly.
Yep.
It's in the right superannuation account for you with consideration to all the product features and the costs and the investment options and the ability to diversify and it working for you, and insurances attached to it as well. So get it set up correctly, because obviously each time you change superannuation accounts, you trigger brokerage, you trigger CGT, you've got time in and out of the market. So set it up correctly so that it's at least there. When you talk about obviously adding more money to it, that really boils down to the individual situation. And there is an argument to say yes, as a young person with a great disposable income and the risk of the lifestyle creep coming in, they may want to set up a small salary sacrificing strategy to help give their super a really good boost in life when they have got that freedom and that flexibility in their cash flow. They can do that if they want. That's just an added thing if they want. And then, of course, starting to invest and having emergency savings. Those things really can all be appropriately and should seriously be considered in your 20s.
Realistically, someone who's 25 is probably going to be looking more at potentially saving for a house than thinking about their super.
Not necessarily. I think you're underestimating people, especially, as I said, the millennials and the Gen Zs who are wanting to do things differently than what their parents did.
Yep.
Don't want to have it to be on an age pension, want to decide when they want to retire, really empowered. There are definitely a group of people out there who are using a little bit of salary sacrificing as well as investing and as well as having savings. And I wouldn't necessarily just assume that just because you're young you wouldn't bother with super or it's not of that much of interest. There is a huge value. In fact, to sound like a complete and absolute nerd, when I was in my 20s, I had not salary sacrificing, but a small after-tax contribution. It was only a little bit to help my superannuation keep growing.
Yeah.
And I since then have paused it now because I have children and that money is more valuable in our family budget. But yes, it is a big difference. And when you look at the compounding interest over the long run, what it may end up meaning you've got $30,000, $40,000 more in superannuation than if you hadn't.
Okay, on to the 30s, people in their 30s, and I am in that as well. Is this then, again, making some assumptions? And I'm wary making assumptions now because you've just pulled me up on one of them. But typically, people, if they're continuing to work into their 30s, they are reaching a higher earning capacity, not necessarily the maximum. That would probably come a little bit later on, but they are starting to earn more money. They're likely to have some more commitments, potentially, whether that is a family or some investments and a house, or needing to pay rent, more rent if they've got a bigger house now, that kind of thing. What should they be looking at? What should we be looking at in our 30s? And also, is this where we start to see a real divide between men and women in that kind of the 30 to 40 age bracket, particularly in superannuation, because you're starting to see women potentially taking some time to have kids, and that's where they really start to see their super taking a hit?
Look, you are spot on. Yes.
I was so delicate.
Yeah, I could see you, because initially I was like, oh, where are we going with this? And then you articulated your concerns perfectly. And you are right. This is a very concerning problem that if it's not dealt with in a proactive way, that superannuation gap gets bigger and bigger, and it can become quite scary for women who have obviously stepped out of the workforce, whether it be permanent or just for a short period of time. It obviously takes a hit.
Say if it's not dealt with in a proactive way, how do you deal with that then? How do you kind of correct that super imbalance?
We're going to have to do that in another podcast.
So that's a great idea. I'll write that down.
They're down, yes,
Yep.
because there are actually lots of strategies and solutions that you can apply in the same type of way to catch up on lost time and lost opportunities.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but it definitely helps bridge that gap, and it helps you get back on your path of having your superannuation. And superannuation is a very important asset. Like people who don't think about or care their super, please look at your statements and pay attention. But for people in their 30s, and sorry to deviate for a second, people in their 30s, superannuation, if it's not been looked at before, it needs to be looked at now. So again, look at where the money is invested, look at the product you're using, is it right, the fees. The other thing that you really need to be looking at if you haven't already in your 30s, and you probably know I'm going to use this word, personal insurances. Oh. Do you have income protection? Because if you've got a family and you are providing for that family and you have responsibilities, even if you don't actually have a family, what happens if you get sick and cannot go to work, or you're in an accident and cannot go to work for an extended period of time, or if you cannot go back to work indefinitely? Do you have something to protect you? So an income protection policy, in a nutshell, pays you a certain amount of money, typically around 75% of your income, until you can return back to work, or until normally around about age 65. So these are things that people in this age group really start looking at and taking out these policies, because they're aware that so much responsibility lies on their shoulders. And if they fall apart, the whole family falls apart, or their financial strategy also falls apart, because if you can't work, you can't pay the bills, you can't keep investing, you have to rely on the government, you can't borrow money. So insurances that is a right time. And there's income protection, there's trauma cover, there's life cover, there's TPD cover. That's when you go and get advice as to how to afford it, what the cost is, how to structure it so it's cost effective. Then, of course, looking at investing as well. And obviously, I should say before investing, obviously emergency money, particularly if you've got lots of different things going on in your life and big responsibilities, you always need to make sure that the boat can keep afloat. And you would look at, all right, I've got superannuation underway, I've got a mortgage, I'm starting to earn some good money at the moment, I'm also noticing I'm paying a lot of tax. Maybe I need to start investing, and maybe I need to look at maybe a debt recycling strategy, or maybe I need to look at borrowing to invest and doing things efficiently, and, looking at some educated and informed investment decisions that may involve borrowing to invest. Obviously, always backed with professional advice. But these are the sorts of things that you can, this age group really should be looking at, not necessarily doing, but looking at, understanding, because when you look at it and understand it, you will know when the time is right if you want to apply that or not.
Okay, we'll move on to the 40s now, and I'm interested in this because it kind of feels like this would be peak earnings. We will come back in just a second and kind of unpack that one, because it feels like 30s is where there's still a lot of time, and any changes that you make to, say, superannuation have a lot of time to still take effect. 40s, you're kind of halfway through your working career potentially by 45 or so. And is that kind of a turning point? I'm interested in. Is there kind of any like artificial line where we can say you need to have done this by 45? I'm hoping that you'll be able to give me something very, very concrete that I can bank on. We'll come back in a moment and do that. All right, Canna, we've established that it's never actually too late to start looking at your money. In your 40s, have I made the right assumption in saying this is kind of peak earnings, or is it 40s into 50s typically peak earnings?
I don't think in this day and age you can have those assumptions, because there are a lot of people who go and reinvent themselves and go into different career paths and maybe go back to school, university or TAFE, and also people that launch new businesses that suddenly flourish. So I don't think you can really pigeonhole people into, this should be your peak.
I think I've made 5
era.
assumptions today, and I think one of them has been correct so far.
I guess I am very open-minded, and I look at, I see all different walks of life.
Yeah.
And I see people doing very well in their 20s, earning huge amounts of money, and then they may burn out, and then they earn less in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then I see the flip side. And I've seen plenty of people grow in huge amounts of wealth even in their 60s. So I guess I've seen it all. I'm a bit more open-minded as to what could potentially happen.
All right. So in someone working in their 40s, is this where you might see someone starting to quite aggressively funnel money into their superannuation, for instance, say through kind of salary sacrificing or other strategies?
Look, superannuation is incredibly important. As I say all the time, I sound like a broken record. If they haven't considered superannuation now, that is, I wouldn't say alarm bells, but I would be very concerned that it's not been prioritized. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're one of those people, this is the catalyst to look at your superannuation statements and make sure it's consolidated and look at, what you're doing to manage it correctly. So superannuation is probably number one biggest priority, followed by obviously things like debt reduction if you've still got a mortgage. Looking at how you're tracking with that mortgage. Is that mortgage still going to be around when you're in your 70s wanting to retire? So looking at what you could do to try and bring those debts down. Looking at, of course, investing as well. Again, as you mentioned, some people will most likely be at their peak earning capacity, particularly if they're in employment. They may want to look at some sort of gearing strategy or investment strategy and diversifying their assets outside of the family home. So yes, it is superannuation, debt reduction, diversification, and really looking at the overall comprehensive strategy of what their retirement is looking and what are the timeframes and making sure that it's going to be safe and secure, because this is where you can really step up and make a big difference because you've still got 20 years ahead of you where you can use those opportunities. And
I'm just so wary now of making any assumptions that
I'm sorry. I'm not making it like your day very easy.
No, you're not, but that's okay. But I think that a lot of what I'm assuming are probably popular misconceptions. I think that a lot of people would assume the same thing about different kind of demographics, that this is kind of where peak earnings would be. And apparently that's not necessarily the case. Into the 50s, I would have thought that this was where the focus shifts to paying off debts, to try and clear any debts prior to that kind of run into retirement.
You are correct.
Yes, at last. 2 out of 6 assumptions. That's
backed with super.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's partly right.
And look, as a financial planner, there were situations where I would come across where the client had a mortgage and had some superannuation and they didn't have any investments. And we would look at the goals and the timeframes and we would agree on a strategy that was just focused on paying off the mortgage and beefing up the superannuation. And for us, as in me working with the clients and what the client wanted, it was an efficient strategy not to worry about investing at that time because of the tax benefits behind superannuation. Superannuation was a more efficient asset class to use in building up their wealth whilst also trying to pay off their home as quickly as possible.
Some of those strategies for building up superannuation, say we're still looking in the 50s, is it kind of salary sacrificing? Is it spouse contributions?
Spouse contributions.
How does that work?
So it's where you split your spouse contribution and there's a lot of fine print, which we should almost do a podcast about all the options to beef up your super, which I think could be a lot of fun because I'm quite passionate about super because remember, super is sexy.
Yes, you are.
But
Very
yes,
passionate.
it's where you basically can split your contribution towards your spouse. And you get a rebate back. You have to put a certain amount in. It's one of many different strategies. To be really honest with you, it's not the most fabulous one, but it definitely can help, especially if you've got a partner where they've got a huge amount of superannuation and the other partner maybe have been stay at home or cared for family members and doesn't have much. So we're helping balance it out a little bit more, especially when you can take into consideration the caps around superannuation.
Okay. And this is really where that advice helps. Getting professional advice now when you're looking at some of those strategies like spouse contributions or just making additional payments, contributions towards your super. It is so important to get some professional guidance before you embark on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if we're here looking at kind of paying off debts, trying to potentially get mortgage free and beefing up the super, I'm seeing super as a really kind of
It
a
is.
theme, a continuing theme through this, that it's never too late to focus on super.
It's never too late. And in fact, superannuation only became compulsory, I believe, around about 1992. So there are a lot of people who actually didn't have superannuation that were in the workforce. So there is still lots of opportunities, loopholes, and windows and concessions to allow people to be able to make up for lost time and lost opportunities.
Someone in their 60s, are they, and I know that the retirement age, the formal kind of retirement age shifts, but is in the 60s the financial focus on kind of preparing for retirement? And what does that actually look like in terms of what can you do when you might have 5 or 10 years left of work or 2 years left of work before you start kind of using that superannuation for your retirement? What can you do at that, what I would have thought was a pretty late stage?
Well, this is where looking to maximize your superannuation as a nest egg. And yes, you may, depending on your situation, your assets, your liabilities even, that's where you may qualify for a government age pension, where you can supplement your allocated pension from superannuation with some government support.
Okay. And is it a case of getting financial advice on those as to how that would work so that you're essentially maximizing your entitlements?
Absolutely. And this is the beauty of a financial planner. And a financial planner actually that I would recommend that specializes in Centrelink because it is a complicated area and there are ways of helping maximize your entitlements.
Okay. So 60s is really gearing up for retirement. Is it also, to go back to almost the beginning, is it revising a budget for what life looks like in retirement? Because I would imagine that suddenly you're working off a different income now. It's essentially your retirement savings.
Or your retirement passive income.
Your
Michael.
retirement passive
we come
income.
from a place of abundance and prosperity.
I'm sorry. And so you're working off your retirement passive income. And so suddenly your income is different.
Yes.
And so that's a reset of your budget, right?
Again, not necessarily.
Oh,
You are
no.
so negative with money. You're thinking retirement means you have to 2-minute noodles for dinner.
No,
and
it's not. I'm
playing
just saying,
bingo at the RSL. No.
there's nothing wrong with bingo at the RSL.
I play dog bingo with my kids. I love bingo, but it doesn't have to be don't have to think about retirement as a retirement in poverty as such. It doesn't mean you're retired, so now you've got to go on this really strict tight budget. Some people's retirement is better than their real current lives, or their working lives, because they have the freedom to now travel overseas.
Well, this is what I was actually thinking was that is it about now just recalibrating the budget so that the money is going to what you want it to now, so that if you want to be able to afford an overseas trip every year, that you make sure that you're putting that money aside, or you're kind of adjusting your living expenses, etc., so that you are dealing with the new income level that you are working on.
Clearly, you did not listen to our most recent budgeting reboot podcast, Michael, because I actually say there, whenever your situation is changing, you must redo your budget. So you would need to do a budget to go, okay, all right, this is my current living expenses. I like my lifestyle, but when I go to retire, I want the same lifestyle and an overseas holiday once a year and one domestic holiday once a year. So you would add that now back into your budget.
I'm sensing a little bit of friction in the studio today.
I'm giving you a hard time today. I'm
No,
really sorry. It's not
it is
intentional.
good because I need to learn not to make so many assumptions, especially in something like this where I think assumptions can probably be pretty damaging, that you assume that people aren't looking at their super in their 20s. That's an assumption I made.
And I should not make the assumption that you're making negative assumptions, because I'm sure some of your assumptions are fair and reasonable. So my apologies.
That's a fine concession. I don't know whether it's a genuine concession, but I'll take it.
It is.
All right. There's a fair bit in this, and every one of these age demographics we could pretty much kind of do a whole episode on. But the take-home message is that it is never too late to start paying attention.
Please don't ever throw the towel in and think I'm done. I've lost. There's no hope. There's never ever the case.
And your greatest ally in this would be a financial advisor, someone who can actually assess your situation and help you figure out kind of these. Everything we talked about here is just kind of some starting points, really. And when we're looking at people in their 20s, just starting out in work, that it is establishing some good financial habits, starting a budget, starting to think about superannuation, being mindful of your super and kind of where that's going, potentially looking at starting to save for investments as well. Moving into your 30s, considering your insurances, considering your commitments, and making sure that you are covered for things to go wrong if they do.
Can I slip something in there quickly?
Sure.
Goals. Having financial goals. I mean, look, every demographic here and age group here should have goals. But if you don't have a goal in your 30s, put one in quickly, because when you have a goal, it adds a new, I guess, zest to your life, because you actually have something to work towards. You have clarity, you have direction, you're more accountable with your money.
Something to manifest.
I really think you are cringing every time I use that word about abundance and prosperity. And
Never. I do not cringe. I'm cringe proof.
And don't get me wrong, I am a hard and fast factual person when it comes to money and crunching numbers. So yes, you need a goal in there, a goal to build up long-term growing passive income, a goal to have the mortgage on top. So have goals in there and keep them in there.
Yep. And so the 30s is there kind of thinking about the mortgage as well, and looking at some of those investment strategies, debt recycling, etc., which there is a good episode that we've done previously about debt recycling and explaining exactly kind of what that is. It's definitely worth going back and having a listen to. Into the 40s, I'm not even going to use the word peak earnings or anything anymore, because every time I mentioned it, I feel like I was way off target.
If that's your peak, you're then closing yourself up to further peaks.
Okay. That's a good way to look at it. I will not close myself off to a further peak. And look at debt reduction, really still focusing on investing, still looking at your super, and not just looking at your super, kind of really getting involved and getting kind of a good advice and making sure that you're happy with where it's at. Into your 50s, the focus is very much on, at that point, kind of paying off your debts, getting mortgage free if you can, getting that advice to make sure that you are heading in that direction and hopefully able to achieve that before you reach retirement. God, I'm wary right now. I'm just watching you going, oh, don't say something.
No, this is good. I'm like, you summarize my points very, very well.
I listen. I do listen. Even though you accused me of not listening to the previous budgeting episode that we did, I do listen. On occasion, I listen. And into 60s, which is kind of preparing for retirement and kind of looking at those last minute strategies for supercharging your super, and then getting some good advice as to how that super will play out throughout your retirement, so that you're maximizing the potential for other entitlements like the aged pension or other pensions that might be available to you, alongside your retirement savings and also your passive retirement income that might be coming in as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, God, yes. This feels like a win. And also redoing your budget for retirement.
10 out of 10.
Yes, I feel like today has been a good day. It didn't look like it a few times there, but overall, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. All right. How can we find you?
Fastest place is obviously on Instagram. You can send me through a DM and you'll catch me, not stuff. And probably on Sugar Mum's Fireplay, my Monday morning podcast, which is, they're about 45 minutes, sometimes 50 minutes, and we go into way more detail.
Did you know that we have, we're nudging that today?
My bad.
Yeah, I feel like if you didn't pull me up on everything I said, we would have rolled this in about 25 minutes.
Okay, mental note, learn to let Michael make his assumptions.
Even if they're wrong. All right. And look, you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. You can find my novel, How to Be Remembered, wherever you buy books. We talked about that a lot at the start of the show. That could have been why we've run so much overtime today, Canna. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast. Please leave us a review as well. Next week, we are going to get into refinancing and some of the traps and things you need to be aware of when you set out to refinance a loan. It will be a really interesting topic. Don't miss it.